Maloloso fo maua malalangi mama e au ona whaamua pelevi I ngai lea tua o lana alofa tu noa wa mawhai ai ona tatu botu nei tu la. My name is Mel Fasavalu. Thank you for that introduction. Before I begin, I really just want to acknowledge Malia and Brian and the Tautai Pasifika team for the invitation to speak. I can remember when Brian asked me to speak, I said, oh, come meet with me because I don't know if I can meet the brief. So came along and I thought, okay, let's do this thing. I also really want to acknowledge Donna and Russell because Donna and Russell were my first introduction to Tautai Pasifika, and they did some amazing work for us at our school in terms of tapasa and also for NZDI. So the start of this journey, this fōlaunga, I guess is it is an act of voyaging, and if you know traditional voyaging, it's a rough ride. It's not easy. So my fōlaunga, or my whainga, if you like, was launched off this space. This is Manono. Manono is a small island in between the two bigger islands in Samoa, and as was already said, my dad came from Whaleo, which is over here. I have no idea if you can see my cursor, hopefully you can. And Salua's down this end, and my story goes that my dad used to walk down with his brother down to Salua, and a trip of about 20 minutes and play volleyball. And those of you who know my dad, I think Trika and Donna are in the audience, they will know my dad's really short, and I don't know what he was playing, but he came home with a wife anyway, so that's how the story goes. So my village people, I guess for me, these two here are center point in my mind in terms of the work that we do currently in schools. Madison is 8, she is year 4, and Josiah turns 5 in October, and so he will be at school in term 4. My blessings. So today's fōlaunga is really a fōlaunga towards cultural competence, I guess. And I know that you've read this booklet inside out, cover to cover, she chuckles. And yes, there's a focus on key shift 3 about that fōlaunga towards cultural competence. But in some respects, you can't really divorce one key shift from another. And maybe this is my disclaimer in case I wander off the topic, but I will be touching on some of the other key shifts as well, I think. While we're talking about disclaimers, what I'm going to share today is really just the Waimahia journey, and it's just what we have tried to put in place and what we continue to strive to put in place for our Pasifika students, really for all of our students. So definitely not saying this is the be all and end all and the only way. This is just maybe, hopefully might give you some examples of what can happen. I just want to talk about culture a little bit to start off with. So I really like the way that Ezra Schuster talks about culture, and he likens it to a tree. And so there's all of these kind of visible things that happen in schools, things like celebrations and cultural performances and those things. And those things are definitely important, not saying that those aren't. But I think in terms of really culturally relevant for our students, particularly in their learning, it's these things. It's the deeper things about our ways of being, our ways of thinking, our ways of learning. And sometimes those can be harder to implement in schools. So every journey, if you like, our school has this amazing whaavai. Whaavai is foundation. I was very fortunate in that I inherited a school that has the foundations that are quite indigenous and decolonizing, if you like. So I just want to give you a bit of context. So Waimahia used to be Weymouth Intermediate. And in 2012, the board of the time decided that they would rebrand the school. There was a whole host of reasons for that rebranding, but when that opportunity came along for them, they wanted to go back to the roots of this whenua. And so they made a deliberate choice to tie themselves to mana whenua and to really honour a tupuna of this area, Mahia. So our school is called Waimahia, the Waters of Mahia. Alongside that, we're in Tainui whenua, if you like. And so the school decided that they would take on a saying from Kingi Tawhiao, and Tainui gave them permission to do so. This particular saying or vision of Kingi Tawhiao was chosen because of where the school was at that time. And so Kingi Tawhiao was the Māori king at the time of the land wars. And so his people were dispossessed and chased off their land, and they were kind of down and out, if you like. And so this whakatauki speaks of using the resources around us, and that, you know, that we are well equipped to build and fashion our own house. And I think that's a really cool thing to remember as Pasifika people, because often what we bring to the table is considered less. And so this whakatauki is really saying what you bring with you, your culture, your language, your identity is a great resource to build yourselves and build your own rangatiratanga, if you like. In our whare, so at Waimahia, we're about building houses. In our whare, we have 3 really strong po that hold up the tangata, or the roof, if you like, of the whare. And at the front of our whare, we have mana, our integrity, our identity. That's the first thing you see. And then at the heart of our whare, in the middle, we have the po called manakitanga, and that's about our care for ourselves, each other, and the environment. And deep within our whare, we hit mātauranga. And the board could have chosen ako, which means learning, that reciprocal learning, sorry. But mātauranga was chosen because there's a deliberate push that mātauranga Māori and indigenous knowledges would be brought to the fore. In keeping with the building houses, when we conceptualize what teaching and learning, how teaching and learning work together, we think about that in a whaletele. And our whaletele has different parts, but basically it holds our pedagogy, which are our polalo, and our pola are our curriculum content, and our poltu clearly are in the middle of our whare and hold the tawalunga up. And our tawalunga we consider to be our graduate profile. So with these pūrākau, with these foundational principles as our whaavai, it's not really surprising that we have an agenda of indigenizing learning. And so for the last probably nearly 3 years, this has been a strategic goal of ours. I think that in a colonized system like ours, that people who look like me are considered other. And so it's assumed, I said before, that our language, our knowledge is is less, and that the language of success is English. And that, you know, in order to, for a long time in this country, in order to succeed at school, you needed to assimilate. And so some of the master narratives that we have out there about Pacific people is one of underachievement, of poverty. And while it's true that we populate those statistics, I think that alongside that statistic has come the stigma, and that when you're brown, you're unintelligent, and when you're brown, you don't speak proper English, and when you're brown, you can't achieve and you can't learn. And so we have a deliberate agenda that we talk back and we counter those definitions that have been placed upon us. It says in the Pacific Action Plan, APEC, like that, I'll remember that, the action plan that privileging those dominant ways creates barriers for our Pacific learners. So some of the ways that we do that is we unashamedly centre BIPOC people and knowledge. And so we do that in all of the ways that you probably do them too. our read aloud. So everybody reads aloud to their kids every day, and they're books that are either by BIPOC authors, or they showcase BIPOC people in a positive light. Guest speakers are the same. When we had a tatau tufunga come in, a tattoo artist who does traditional tattooing, we deliberately chose a woman, because we wanted to, just to show that it's women who are doing this work as well. When our kids were redesigning our playground, it was a Māori designer who came in to work with them. I know most schools do language weeks, but for us, it's about an opportunity for our parents to shine. And so part of the process is that the teacher in charge of that particular language week meets with parents, and the parents tell us the kinds of learning that they think are important for our kids about their culture and their language. And of course, cultural concert. Again, those things are like that upper level of the tree of culture, and they're the things that we can see. And the thing that we've been working mostly on is really a context for learning. And you can see that those examples really showcase and privilege traditional knowledge. And so things like having the Star Dome and Te Toki Voyaging Trust came in and spent a couple of days working with all of our classes to learn about the Star Compass. And then we had some time on the waka as well. Things like our kids being able to express their identity in all of the myriad of ways that they are used to, like singing and dancing, but also in terms of plays, of written in a written form, all of the different ways to do that. And because we are tied to, we have Kingi Tawhiao's whakatauki, we learn about the kingitanga, and really bringing his vision was said in around 1860, but what would that vision look like now? And part of that is that we want our students to know that those knowledges aren't just history, those are relevant knowledge for today. And can I just say that this is good knowledge for all New Zealand children, all Aotearoa children. This isn't just important for Pasifika students. As long as this knowledge is saved, we'll do that with the Pacific kids. We can do that out south because, that's where all the Pacific kids are. As long as we keep it there, our knowledge will continue to be othered because it won't be considered mainstream. The other part of our culture, if you like, is that we spend a lot of time on is whasinomanga. Whasinomanga means identity. And when you're a Pacific person living in a Western country, often identity can be quite a difficult thing to come to terms with. We're an intermediate school, so identity is, as they're learning to identify more with their peers at this time. And so identity needs to be a big part of the work that we do. And we think about identity as primarily relational. So you don't talk about, when people say, who are you? Often you refer to your parents, or you refer to where you come from and who you come from. And so in that way, whasinomanga is personal and mutual. Whasinomanga also is, I said before, is really important in terms of our core value of mana. So at school, we acknowledge that our students never come to school alone. If we're going to say that whasinomanga is relational, we have to talk about the vā. And I think vā is a concept that is becoming more well known. Vā essentially means space. Vā is a pan-Pacific concept. The Japanese even talk about vā. Vā is this dynamic relational space, and we grow and we dwell in the vā. Vā connects us with other people, but it also connects us with places. And I'm sure that each of you can think about a place that you have a relationship with that means something to you. And VAR can also connect us with, in terms of ideas, connects ideas. So new learning is usually connected to other things that relate to that. New ideas also have life. And Tupua Tamasese said that that we have a VAR with animate and inanimate. And so I think ideas have life. And so we have relationships with ideas as well. I think the importance of learning about VAR is really that it creates safety. And that safety comes because you know where you stand. So the way that I describe it when we talk about it with our kids is that the way that they might interact with the principal, say, is going to be quite different to the way that they interact with their friends. And so, you know, VAR changes and VAR is different. There might be times if I was on camp earlier this week, and you know, we can have a joke and all the rest of it, but when I'm the principal and you're in trouble, that's quite a different kind of VAR. So, as I said, VAR's dynamic. Tuangalu says that there are 37 types of VAR, and the one that I think speaks best or describes best the space between teacher and student is the sacred space, vātapuia. VAR is something that needs to be maintained. So tausi means to look after. So we need to look after that space, that relationship. It needs to be maintained over time. And when that VAR is spoiled, we need to restore it. And te ole VAR means to restore VAR. I think that this understanding of VAR helps us to really navigate our relationships with our students, families, and colleagues. Whasinomanga is a sense of becoming. And I really like the way that Sister Vitolia Moa talks about VAR as she likens it to a ball of wool. And this ball of wool are the different strands of our identity, because our identity isn't, you know, isn't just one side of your identity, it's multifaceted. And in order to kind of grow into our identity, you need to do some unknotting, or some what she calls sufi. And when you sufi something, you're pulling at the strands of your identity. You can't yank it because that creates a bit of trauma, and actually it doesn't help. But you gently coax parts of your identity as it grows. The other thing that you do with identity is that you weave it together. And so me, the mum, has really grown me, the teacher. And I went into teaching as, you know, I already had kids. And so, you know, I think that my parenting and my teaching, those strands of my identity have really flowed into each other. There are multiple strands of whasinomanga, and it's okay. One of the things she says is it's okay to be growing one strand and kind of ignoring that there's a little bit of a tangled mess somewhere else. I'm talking to myself, that's why I keep looking over there, because there's no faces. I wish there were faces, but never mind. Yeah, so you can grow parts of your identity, and it's okay that, you know, parts of it you're kind of ignoring for now. And that this is how we build connections. So knowing all of these things, there are some particular things that we do in terms of creating identity and having that sense of belonging for our students at school. And so term one is always very much a mana kind of focus. So we have, we learn our students name stories. I like the way that Malia talked about names having such importance. And so we learn each other's name stories. We have that collective understanding of what it means to belong to our school and to your class and to each of our whānau, which is our houses. And then we also have lalanga groups, which I won't go into because I know Pelo's the master when it comes to lalanga groups. So we have these collective expectations, and we're starting to like really build the VAR between each other as classmates. And what are the expectations we have of each other? And our kids have expectations of us as teachers as well. And the other part of mana is really building the mana of our rohe and of our pūrākau around here at in Manurewa. There's a real sense of Manurewatanga, and so we learn about the pūrākau of Manurewa. We learn about who mahia is, and all of these things help our kids to connect and to belong to our school. There's a real push for us that our kids need to have a vā mawhana, a warm relationship, a warm vā with significant adults, and we want that to happen with more than one. And so our kids are connected to their classroom teacher. We're not the intermediate school that compartmentalizes their curriculum. We have our kids mostly in one space. We do have specialist kind of areas as well, but there's this kind of one teacher that they belong to. As I said before, we have lalanga groups. That's a different adult that they then have a vā with, and then also their whānau teachers. And I think, building relationships for the sake of relationships, so that when you have someone to celebrate with all of the amazing things that you're doing, someone to encourage you, but you also have someone that, more than one person, that when things break down, you've got a selection of people that you can go to that you already have a relationship with. And that helps you to, helps us to be mana enhancing at all times, and also helps us to help our kids restore the vā. And at a conference a couple of weeks, at the AIMS conference, I think it was, sorry, the name escapes me, but he talked about, a psychologist talked about how our kids, their brains, the teenage brain has, we know that it's not very mature, but worsened by COVID, if you like. And so our kids need to be taught how to make connections with each other. And we've noticed that in terms of some of our year 7 behavior at the moment. So as a result of some of those things around connecting our kids with who they are and who they come from, I just wanted to share a little example of a poem that one of my kids wrote about her connection. I hope that's enough time. So while we're indigenizing learning, one of the things we realized as a teaching team was that we really needed to indigenize our thinking. We, all of us, grew up in a colonized nation, and so we know that we have colonized brains, and so we have done that in a number of ways. Clearly, professional development, everybody does that in their schools. I'm just going to take that as a given. Like the kids, they start the year with mana, manaakitanga and mātauranga, big focus on mana. Our staff are the same. And it's about vision casting, if you like, but it's about purpose. And so we have, as a staff, walked up Mātuku Tūreia and along Puhinui, which is our awa, and looked out onto Manukanuka o Hoturoa, which is our moana. We have been to Ngārua Wahia and stood on the spot where Pōtatau was first crowned as the first Māori king, and we learnt about the kingitanga. We have spent a day with the Polynesian Panthers and learnt about that struggle and what it was like around the Dawn Raids time, but also about the connections that Polynesian Panthers had with Māori. And so, knowing that there's this real connection between tangata whenua and tangata moana. And then we've also learnt about pūrākau, the pūrākau of our kahuiako, and visited each school and had a chance to share those things. And I think there's kind of, yes, the content, but there's something about the connection with the whenua. There's something about actually walking the pepeha as opposed to just learning about the pepeha. There's something about being on the waka when you're learning about wayfinding and not just, seeing photos of the waka. So we make it a thing that we visit, that we go and we touch the whenua and we connect with the whenua, not just the pūrākau. At the moment, everybody is learning Te Reo Māori, so we, all of our students learn Te Reo Māori, and we found through some teacher voice that confidence for them was the barrier, and so we have a couple of experts on our staff who are helping us to learn Te Reo Māori, and it's really fun, and it gives teachers who aren't so confident a really good way of taking that back to their classroom. Those are kind of standard professional readings that we have for all of us. Everybody has a copy of those books. Can I just say that the Wayfinding Leadership one we've been slow reading that as a leadership, and it's really, I found it quite hard, and we've talked about this because some of it feels airy-fairy. And I think that, you know, one of the things we realized is because that's our colonized brain thinking. When we think leadership texts, we think Western. And so reading this has really helped us to kind of unpack these ideas from quite a Indigenous way of thinking. In terms of external support, and I would count RTLB in this, we're super choosy about our PLD. We use our curriculum framework as a filter, and so when you're wanting to do interventions in our school, we're looking for whether they're relational, because we believe that learning happens as a relationship between kids. Is it co-constructivist? Is it culturally responsive? Is it integrated, because we have an integrated curriculum? So can it integrate into the other parts of our learning? And does it foster student agency? We work on the basis of growing teachers. And so I think at the moment, and Gulam will tell me if I'm wrong, but I think at the moment, all of our referrals are teacher referrals. And I think that's this premise that, yes, the child has needs, but it's us that need to change the way that we respond to those needs. And so we're looking at building our capability to respond better to our tauira. And I guess that's at the heart of the matter, is that what do our kids need right now? I have this amazing DP in Senko, and Gulam, who is our liaison person, works with her, and I know that they have very robust debates, shall we put it that way. I can't see Gulam, but I'm sure he's nodding. Probably the biggest piece of work that we have done this year related to indigenizing our thinking has been a result of this, because well-being is something that is talked about so much. And Dr. Jemima Tiatia said this, and you can see why we need to connect our kids with their language, culture, and identity, because it affects their well-being. Because when you can't connect to who you are, how well can you feel in yourself? I think too that work in our curriculum framework, it says that we as teachers are to actively discard deficit thinking. Russell Bishop would agree with that. And in the APEC, it says that we are to commit to professional learning around anti-racism and discrimination. So as a staff in term 1 this year, we talk about, we're a project-based learning school, and so our kids do project-based learning. So we undertook a project-based learning of ourselves as teachers, and it was around this question. It was a lesson in how to sit in the discomfort without armor. And those of you who've done the Dare to Lead program with that was founded, I guess, by Brené Brown, this is the definition for vulnerability. So we committed to a couple of things. We committed to name things no matter how uncomfortable. And so we talked about all of those things. I think that if you can't name it, then you can't change it. If you can't even say the words, then how do you confront it? And how do you reject it? we committed to some deep reflection, and I to hold up the mirror to ourselves. So not just reflecting on what has been done to us as colonized people, but what have we in turn done too, because we recognize that the pedagogy of the oppressed is true, that that the oppressors can sometimes turn out to be oppressors. And so we had to really think about that too. So some of the scenarios that we kind of talked about were these kinds of things. And, you know, like when teachers don't want to tell the parents about the bad behavior, who holds the power in that scenario? And when we think about kapahaka as not being prime learning, what are we saying about where, you know, which learning is prime learning? And when we assume that certain kids deserve our best game, what does that say about the other kids? They don't deserve our best game? And how often do we victim blame before we're willing to think that maybe it was my teaching and not because the kids can't just do better? These are just some of the things that teachers said came out of their learning during that project. I think that colonization as the matrix analogy that really struck a chord with me. I think this was the thing about this matrix. I think as long as we take a neutral stance, when we say neutral and normal and mainstream, who do we mean by that? And so when we take a neutral stand, it's not neutral. It's just not. And it continues to other those who sit outside mainstream. And I wish I could see you guys. The thing probably the new learning for us now is measuring what we value. When we talk about success in schools, often we talk about reading, writing, and maths. And yes, those things are important to us too. In fact, I think that to say that our kids can't do reading, writing, maths is in fact racist. So as well as measuring reading, writing, and maths and Te Reo Māori and the other learning areas, we really spent time thinking about what is it that we really value. We did this as a board, and these are the things we value. They're not so easy to measure. Can I just say that? This one here around our learners have a strong sense of mana, manaakitanga, and mātauranga. It's our school definition for well-being. Because all of those things, your identity, your manaaki for others and yourself, and our learning, our mātauranga, all of those connect us with a sense of wellness, a sense of being able to accomplish things, a sense of being able to affect change on my own life. Yeah, the next part, of course, is how we measure these things that we value. And so we have spent a lot of time creating some fit for purpose or developing hopefully some fit for purpose tools. And so we've gone down the way of, things like surveys and slider tools, progressions. Our graduate profile, this is our graduate profile on the screen. Our graduate profile has progressions that sit behind that, and the kids and the teachers use those to track their progress across 2 years. And we're currently working with Te Kite Hono to digitize these things so that we can get our data really quickly. Because what we want to do with that data clearly is to have some evidence-based talanoa on impact, and we're really mindful of data sovereignty. So this data is gifted to us by the kids, and so we're very clear that we give that back to the kids, and we look at ways that we can use that with our students so that it can get better. We're very big on student voice. I have no idea how long I've been talking. Okay. So just in closing, I just wanted to summarize. So, what's been our coordinated effort? It's a school-wide effort. It's a board effort. And so what is our whāwai, or our founding principles as a school? It's an Indigenized, decolonising one. In terms of, I've talked about an agenda of centering BIPOC people and knowledge. And I guess that's something for you guys to think about too, is in your organization, in your schools that you belong to, how much of BIPOC knowledge is centered as good learning. And we've talked about the importance of whāsinamanga and identity, and the importance of vātapuia, that relationship space. We've talked a lot about confronting racism and discrimination, and not just from the outside looking in, but really from the inside looking out, because I don't believe that you can be a culturally relevant teacher unless you've confronted some of your own beliefs. And even as a Pacific person, I know that there's some white supremacist thinking in me, because I grew up here. And so, I do privilege the written word, those kinds of things. And as part of our PBL with our teachers, there were some deep things. We cried together, we laughed together. There were some really deep things that we unearthed. And I can remember talking about something that my parents used to say in my home, and saying that made me feel really yuck inside. And so until we're ready to confront that some of our beliefs perpetuate this idea of othering Pacific and other minority groups, we're not going to really truly be a culturally relevant teacher. Unfortunately, it's not a tick box. There's not a list that you can go, yep, done that, yep, done that. It's a way of being. I've talked about how being neutral is a win for the dominant ideologies, and continues to other women, continues to other Pasifika, continues to other Māori, continues to other neurodiverse, continues to other LGBTQ. So continues to other, all of these other groups. And I've talked a little bit about measuring what you value, and that's our work on, so we're definitely not there yet. I really hope that I have given you a little something to take away with you today. Whawhai lava mo le awanua to Brian and the team, and I guess I've left enough time to take questions. I might have technical difficulties. That's the line, eh, Bill? Okay. I can take questions, Brian. I'm just going to stop sharing. I'm back.
Hi, Mel. It's Rose here.
Hi, Rose.
Hi, I'm going to ask you some of the questions that we've got. So one person asked, where can we find a resource about the different kinds of VAR?
Maybe I should write one. I can send you some stuff. Lots of people learn about the VAR, but I certainly can share some reference points with you. Trying to think off the top of my head. In my master's research, there's quite a big part of that is the VAR, and I can send you some other people like Whetaui Iosefo talk about the VAR. People like Melanie Anai talk about the VAR. Yeah, there's quite a few people talk about the VAR, and Albert Wendt talks about the VAR. So there's quite a few references. Probably, oh, sorry. Off the top of my head, I'll send you something.
Yeah, we can send people some links. That'd be great. And do you know, are all of these terms common to all Pacifica languages?
Yeah. So, yeah, it is one of the things, like I'm Samoan, so I can only talk about this from a Samoan perspective. There is no Pacifica way, if you like. It is very much, we're all different. We're all related, but we're all different. And so most of these terms are Samoan, yeah.
Okay. And another question, there's so much emphasis on Māori and Pacifica learners being perceived as underachievers. And the problem is that the New Zealand curriculum, while it recognises diversity, the assessment system unfortunately doesn't. So what are your feelings about how we can include something in the assessment system for Pacifica, and also about including first languages into English medium system as well?
I'd love to. Yeah, it's a big deal, because we talk about, I mean, even the curriculum as a whole, we have this amazing rich curriculum, and then we come to, what does the ministry want to know? Reading, writing, maths. It's so, like we have this wide curriculum, and then we narrow it when it comes to assessment. Some of the little things that we do here is that when we do ES, or we do the reader writer thing, and so we do that for certain students, but some of that is around language, and so it's not when you're doing the maths, it's not a reading test, and so we'll have a Samoan speaker next to the child and be translating the question, and then they work it out, and and they do that. So that's some of the little things that we do, but I agree, it's a big piece of work that needs to be addressed at ministry level. So let's put that to the ministry, eh? While they're doing curriculum refresh, we should.
That's great. I've got another question here from Lily, who is a counsellor, and she's interested in your school's placement around the need for counselling in schools as per ministry's recent announcement, and the availability of the new Manaaka focus. So how does Pacifica place counselling, or the need for this colonised concept, in your school?
We don't have a counsellor. We used to have a counsellor, but we don't anymore, and various reasons, not because we didn't want one. And it was a board funded position, so we weren't lucky enough to get any funding for a counsellor. And at the moment, we access counselling through our Swiss. Having said that, we talked about the VAR being relational. And so things like when self-harming happens in our school, we have an amazing teacher aide who's able to take, and she uses rongoa as a way of, and the girls or boys, the students make their own salves to help with the healing. And then also, while you're doing that, you talanoa. And so you talanoa about things. And so we use talanoa a lot when it comes to unpacking what's going on for families. Yeah, that's not an easy fix for us, but we find that the group stuff really helps. And if we can get around a group, and we work with people like Te Wā Kōrero, and so they understand that relational kind of vast space, and that our kids need talanoa most of all, and that there's an adult there that can support that talanoa. And so that's what's given us the biggest support in terms of anxiety and those sorts of, and self-harming. I'm going to touch some wood. We haven't had a lot of self-harming this year, so that's been really good. But those are the sorts of things that have worked for our students. We still refer for counselling when there's a need to do that. But our first port of call is, how do we do this in a group? And how do we, it's not the self-harmers group, it's a rongoā group. And there's, people in there that might not necessarily be self-harming, but they're in there because they've got a relationship with the others in that group, because that relationship is what brings trust, and it's what makes the talanoa really rich. And there's an adult there that's able to help our students talanoa in a productive and constructive way.
Thank you. So we have another question from Sharon, who's from our cluster, an RTLB question about transition. So how do you share all the hard mahi that you do in your school with college transitions, as you've only got those 2 years with your students? And how do you share that, the children, the strengthening and empowering of them before they head to college?
Yeah, it's been an interesting discussion in our kahuiako actually around transition. I think I saw Jolene's name pop up. So Jolene Marie is from Clayton Park and is also in our kahuiako. And so we have talked a lot about transition, and not just those kind of handing over of information from year 8 into year 9 or year 6 into 7, but also transition in terms of, what does learning look like at your school? What does your graduate profile look like at your school? And then how does our primary school's graduate profile transition into ours? And if we know that those are the things that are critical to learn and critical to know at your school, we can support that when they come here. And same from us into college. So we've been looking at transition in terms of learning, in terms of graduate profile, and also like beginning to have conversations about what that looks like for our bilingual and rumaki students. Don't have any answers, but I think that's the kind of information that needs to filter through, not just, is there a behavior issue, or what's the level for maths? Those are the kind of the traditional things that we pass on, but we're really looking to pass on the ways of being at your school, and how does that transition through from primary into high school. Don't know if that helps. Hopefully it does.
Great, thank you. And another question here about your referrals. You said your RTLB referrals are focusing on teachers. Is this a collaborative process with your SENCO?
Yes, yeah, very much so. So our teachers, when they look at their data, they sort of identify there are some students who might need some extra whatever, and it's like, I'm not sure how to do that. And so that then becomes a conversation between the teacher and the SENCO, and then our liaison person as well. And generally we're working with teachers because we wanting to grow teacher practice.
Oh, we've got a couple more questions here. So how could you expand a little bit on what you mean by colonisation is like the matrix, in case people don't understand that?
Yeah. So you've seen the film The Matrix. The Matrix is there, but you can't see it. And so I'm trying to think of an example. So the way that we think about things is determined by the way that we're brought up and the messages that we hear all the time. And so sometimes we don't think about what those messages are as they filter through your brain, and then it comes out your mouth. So, when we say things like those examples that I had up, when we say things like, kapa haka doesn't belong in the morning, what are we actually saying? We're saying that kapa haka, this traditional way of learning our histories, the traditional way of being fit, the traditional way of, of being for a people, is not as important as reading, writing, and maths, because those are the things that belong. And that's and I'm saying that even brown people say those things. Even we believe those things sometimes, because we've taken on and assimilated our thinking into what is valued by the Western culture, if you like.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap up the questions there.
Yay.
So, lau susunga Mel Fasavalu. E awea o e whai masui o le mafutanga Tautai Pacifica. E mamoli atu ai e whawhitai tele lava mo lau whaasoa. Ua malie mata e ai, ua malie fo i tā linga e whaalongo e whawhitai tele lava. Thank you to our esteemed Pacific Principal Mel Fasavalu for your inspiring presentation of your educational journey and the great things that you are doing at Waimahia Intermediate. On behalf of Tautai and all of us here today, we would like to express our deep appreciation for your dedication, your commitment and your service to our Pacific community and all those that you serve at your school. It was so interesting to hear about your values and what motivates you as a Pacific educator. So once again, thank you for sharing your personal story and all the wonderful work that you are doing. Whawhitai, malo lava.
Aloha whawhitai.